Good to see you all here. This week, we are explorers, we are discoverers, we are celebrants. This week, we will explore the questions, what does it mean to know, and what's the relationship between knowing and feeling and the arts? This week, we will discover feelings that we all share, a longing for knowledge that runs deeper than fact, a longing for love that will last. The music that you'll hear will rekindle those feelings. Now, the music, as you've just heard, the music we're going to hear isn't the kind of music that you typically hear in church. It is the kind of music that you typically hear on the way to church. Which is a good thing, because it reminds us that we all, Christian and non-Christian, share a deep longing. We all share a desire for something that is deeper. We have an answer. We have an answer for the longings that we share. And that answer is the Lord Jesus Christ. And we are going to discover an epistemology that will help facilitate, help satisfy those longings. Finally, we invite you to celebrate with us the one who is the fountainhead of our knowing, the deep reservoir of our feeling, the God of our intellect, the master of our heart, the telos of our deepest longings, the Lord Jesus Christ.
So, how do we know? I mean, we have a tendency to reduce knowing and understanding to something of the head, of the mind. An epistemology which was built and pummeled into us beginning in those first years in grade school, when we learned the scientific method, where we could capture data, categorize it, control it, and we made information the captive child of our intellect. A way of knowing heady stuff. The problem is, we also know there's more to knowing than we can squeeze on a 3x5 card, or dictate into Evernote, or capture maybe on a thumb drive. We know that because there are times when we will ignore our mind in order to follow our gut. And we also know that because we know that knowledge left to itself will embalm the heart. Knowledge left to itself will turn us into the walking dead. That's what Paul taught us. You see, we know this intellectually. We know that focusing just on the mind will make us less than we were ever created to be. We know that because even here, we talk about teaching truth, but loving well. So we know God designed us to think and to feel, and therefore this morning we want to start fresh. We'd like to head down a new path and broaden our understanding of what it means to know, in order to develop a more healthy way of knowing and a more robust epistemology, and unravel the mystery of what it means to love in order to know. So from that, the songs we're going to hear this morning will remind us that we share a longing to know in a healthy and robust way that the world shares and the world strives for. A love not just for a moment, but for a lifetime. a love that is deep and rich and strong and cannot be defeated. A love that is even unpredictable, crazy, in fact, even surprising. Ultimately, the love that fills the emptiness in our heart with the person and the entirety of who Jesus Christ is.
Well, in case you haven't guessed, this is Arts Week. And it's our privilege to introduce to you Dr. Esther Meek. She is the professor of philosophy of Geneva College, and she's a visiting professor of apologetics at Redeemer Seminary here across town. Dr. Esther Meek is a professor of philosophy. As a writing, teaching, speaking conversationalist, she likes to think and talk about epistemology, the theory of knowledge. That equates to talking about everything in life: identity, vocation, business, learning, research, parenting, and Christian discipleship. She received her BA from Cedarville College, her MA from Western Kentucky University, and her PhD from Temple University. She also studied at Westminster Theological Seminary and Covenant Theological Seminary. She lives in Aliquippa in western Pennsylvania since relocating from St. Louis in 2004 in anticipation of the spiritual and structural restoration of this post-industrial town and its people. She supports the Uncommon Grounds Cafe there, and she serves on the board of Aliquippa Impact Ministries. Her next book project will be an update and a revision to her 1983 PhD dissertation for publication entitled Contact with Reality. And I may mispronounce this, but Palavani's realism and its value for Christian faith. Dr. Meek, welcome to Dallas Theological Seminary. Welcome to Arts Week 2015. Would you join me in welcoming Dr. Meek to our platform this morning?
Oh, it's so good to see you. That music was over the top. That was just fabulous, and I'm just so grateful to be here. I'm a very excitable person, and I in my next life I want to be a jazz musician. So right now I'm trying to calm myself down so I can give this talk. Okay, so there's two of these, and one is smaller. I can't tell which one is smaller. Is it this one, or is it this one? Okay. So I'm going to have a PowerPoint. Do I have to do this to turn it on? Or will you turn it on? Okay. Because these are my notes. So I also, oh yes, there it is. So I can see what you have there. I'm sorry, I'm just getting oriented. I'm supposed to know this. But anyway, thank you so much for coming, and I thank you for having me. I've known about Dallas Seminary all my life, and it's just really remarkable to come and be with you all. And I'm happy to come to Dallas again. I do a lot of that in connection with Redeemer, but I wasn't doing it this semester because I'm working supposedly on this book project. So, but Taylor Lett has infiltrated from Redeemer Seminary. And so I don't know if anybody else is here, but it's good to see Taylor, and especially to get to know you all here. So I'm going to talk about epistemology this week. It really does have to do with art, I believe, and I think it has to do with spirituality too. Okay, so let's see. There we go. I want to tell you at the beginning just a little bit about myself, just so you can see why you might be connecting with me. You might look at me and think, so what is a nice lady like this doing mixed up in a field like epistemology? So I want to tell you that. And then you might think, why might I have anything possibly to do with her? So hopefully I can start to answer that. And this little story of me maybe is a backdrop to all that I'm going to say this week. And we're going to have the problem today and start to have the solution the rest of the week. So you might want to come back I hear that you're liable to be here only for one time, but I hope that's not the case. But anyway, you can get the PowerPoint. But so that beautiful picture was not taken by me. I did paint the shutters this summer, so that's my handiwork. But that's the front of my house. But so I was born into, grew up in a Bible-believing family in the Philadelphia area, and knew all there was to know. I thought about the Bible, and when I got into middle school, I had these questions that I felt were sin. One was, how do I know that God exists? And the other is, how do I know that you exist? All right, so in other words, how do I know that there's a material world outside my mind? I know that sounds strange. But I didn't seem to have any proof. I mean, I was sure I had ideas of you, but precisely because I had the ideas, I couldn't know that you were actually there. So, like I said, I didn't tell anybody because I'm sure that it wasn't being a good little Christian girl, and so I kept it to myself. But later, I found out that those questions weren't sin, they were philosophical. And once I figured that out and figured out that you could actually study philosophy, it just took me maybe 12 hours to make up my mind that that's what I needed to do. It didn't matter whether I had the smarts to do it, it just seemed the most important thing. And so those two questions actually do play out in my philosophical story. The second one, how do I know that you exist, or how do I know that reality exists outside my mind, really was the driving question through all my training in philosophy. And really, when I wrote that dissertation called Contact with Reality, you can see I was looking for some sort of justification to believing in the world outside my mind. And so now actually that I'm coming back and visiting that really old dissertation and trying to redeem it for publication, it's a beautiful thing for me because I realize that I'm in such a different place now. With regard to reality, I used to be this huge skeptic, and now I just want to throw myself into reality, kind of the way we on the East Coast throw ourselves into the waves, so I'm just intoxicated with reality. So anyway, so that's question 2. Question 1, how do I know that God exists, effectively was my question about justifying my own Christianity to myself. And I knew what I was supposed to believe about God, but what I didn't know was how knowing worked. And so when I actually, had enough kind of space in my life to write, I wrote this book called Longing to Know, The Philosophy of Knowledge for Ordinary People. And that's a book for people considering Christianity, whether they're Christians or not, but who have questions about knowing. And I argue that knowing God is like knowing your auto mechanic. And so I've tried to make it a popular book, and it's a very odd philosophy book. But it may be something that you might find valuable. And for me, that was me kind of justifying my own belief in Christianity to myself. So you can see how those questions have kind of played out in my life. And through that, I've come to these proposals about knowing, which we're going to start to talk about, we'll talk about tomorrow, that really have helped with both of those questions. And growing out of that, I've developed my own proposals about knowing, which I call covenant epistemology. And so you're going to be getting some of that this week. And that has effectively turned into a whole vision of life. And I want to invite you into that, and am really glad that I'm able to do that. I love to do philosophy with ordinary people. There isn't anybody ordinary. I know Lewis said that. But in any case, there's one prerequisite that everybody needs who's going to be in philosophy, and that's you have to be born. Okay, so to be human is to ask deep questions, to ask philosophical questions. And I've just really tried to make philosophy accessible to everybody because that matters. That really matters. And I also love to talk to people in different disciplines. So I want to talk about how knowing works in every field, whether it's business or athletics or art or scholarship or spirituality. So you're going to see how it connects to art this week. But the other thing I got to say, and this is maybe a specific caution for you, that growing out of my experience teaching covenant epistemology to people, and that is, if you love God, you want to spiritualize everything, okay? So, you want to talk about knowing and you want to talk about love. Well, of course, the most important person to love and know is God. Yes. And what's more, that's going to become central to my epistemology. But here's the deal. We have this problem that we're going to talk about today, which is a defective understanding of knowing that we've inherited in the modern West. We don't even see it, and it actually warps how we hear the whole thing about knowing and loving God. And so for these talks to do you good spiritually, you've got to start by taking what I say and applying it to your golf game. Okay? And if you skip the golf game, right, it's not going to fix you epistemically in a way that it can really bless your spirituality. Does that make sense? It's a little odd. You're just going to have to trust me. Okay, let's go. Out of this, all of this, my most recent book talks about knowing ventures in any area, and I have come to see knowing as an adventure, a moving, a pilgrimage toward what we do not yet know, right? And then being surprised by what we find. So pilgrimage and gift. So we'll be talking about that this week. But also, I think this whole, what I have to say about how knowing works is also the creative act. And in addition to Geneva and Redeemer, I'm also a fellow of the Fujimura Institute. And so that means I get to use Mako's pictures. When this is one of those. Makoto Fujimura is just a really important artist believer who's speaking a lot into culture, and you probably know because he's the coolest ever. So, but in any case, what I want to say about how knowing works also pertains to the creative act, which means, I don't know what the price of admission was, but you're getting twice for your money because I'm going to talk about knowing God, and I'm also going to talk about the creative act. Okay. So today we're going to talk about the need for what I call epistemological therapy. Tomorrow we'll talk about what is called subsidiary focal integration, or how knowing works. Thursday we'll talk about loving to know, the covenant epistemology, and then this phrase I just love, inviting the real, that'll be Friday. So today, the need for epistemological therapy. So first of all, you guys are already using the word epistemology, but just in case that's a strange word to you, this is how Parker Palmer describes it. Parker Palmer's a famous educator known for this amazing book, To Know As We Are Known. If I, in my covenant epistemology, offer an epistemology that goes with Parker Palmer's work, it's been good, It's really, what he's saying is just really, really wonderful. But he says, the patterns of epistemology can help us decipher the patterns of our lives. Its images of the knower, the known, and their relationship are formative in the way an educated, and I'd say any uneducated person too, not only thinks but acts. The shape of our knowledge becomes the shape of our living. The relationship of the knower to the known becomes the relation of the living self to the larger world. Okay, and when a couple things in there. When you stop and think about knowing, it's always about knowing the world, right? It's about you as the knower and then the known or the yet to be known. So that's kind of like the big relationship of our lives, and all of our lives have to do with orienting in the world. So epistemology is important. The second thing to say here, too, is philosophy sounds like it's really abstract, but I think it's really concrete. And whether you even know you're philosophizing or not, or you're living out a philosophical stance or not, it concretely shapes you. It really does. And so you need to keep that in mind, I think, as we have this conversation. Okay, so what I want to say here is, and this is kind of what was back of my writing Longing to Know. I don't know why my slide is doing that, because it didn't do it at home. I'm sorry for that. But in any case, epistemology can affect you intellectually, spiritually, psychologically, artistically, and even physically. And you can have all that be happening when you don't even know the word yet, let alone, have heard a talk on epistemology. So I want to talk to you about what I think are some of the ideas that we all presume about knowing in the modern West. Now, you may not have been born in the modern West. You may have been born in, Southeast Asia or something like that. And I'm really addressing people who have grown up, as I have, in what is known as modernity in Western European and American culture. And I would like to say, if you say to anybody, what do you think knowledge is? People are most likely to say, well, knowledge is information. Knowledge is facts, data, right? That sort of thing. It might be statements, reasons to support them, that sort of thing. But that's what knowledge is. We tend to think that knowledge is linear. 1 + 1 = 2. This and then this and then that. And, I teach logic, so that's very linear. We tend to think that knowledge is impersonal, that it's just, bits of information, not necessarily connected to you, not necessarily connected to the world. We do, in modernity, we privilege the bits. All right, so analysis is a big word, and what we mean is breaking it down into little bits. And okay, you might be saying, okay, well, I don't do that. I'm just talking about diagnosing our general modern approach to knowledge, okay? So think about somebody you know, it might not be you. And I'm just helping us get in touch with this kind of really large, all these presumptions that we tend to bring to anything that we do in knowing without even thinking about it, okay? We like bits in modernity because, that if we break things down, it helps us get control of them. We can organize them. It can make us more powerful. We want to reduce things down to what they really are. We often misuse the word deconstruct, reduce. We're all into analysis. We're going to just break things apart and then make sense of them. And we do have a power and a control motive here a lot. We think that gives us a hold on reality, and we can control the bits, right? If you're a perfectionist or, you've got OCD, you understand this. But we all tend to have this propensity in the modern world. And we also tend to think, look, we can just read the information off the world. We just collect data. That's what we do. Okay? Actually, what you'd like to do, what you want to grow up to be in your education is you want to grow up to be a computer, right? And collect all the information, right? Or a robot, something. And then you will have become human. Okay. So, in this kind of presumption, this mindset that we have about what knowledge is, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with knowledge as information. In fact, I'm going to help you do it better. But it's the epistemic mindset of knowledge as information that I'm going to argue is defective. So we also have all these ideas about what knowledge is and what it isn't, and we tend to divide those. So these are things that we connect together, and this is, Esther's Daisy of Dichotomies. I developed this in an adult Sunday school class at Park City's Presbyterian Church years ago. But in any case, it's in my book now. But knowledge, facts, reason, science, theory, objective, public, mind, and actually male, I tend to think. Now, I'm not saying you think that, but I think it's a common idea. All of those things we tend to associate, and if you're thinking of the daisy picture, put them all in the center. And what I'm saying is, we think knowledge and facts are the same thing, and reason. And science. Science is our example of what knowledge is, our best paradigm about what knowledge is. So as you're using this daisy diagnostic, put all of these in the center. Now, start to think about what we oppose them to. That's the next slide, okay? Knowledge as over against opinion, or knowledge as over against belief. Facts as over against what? Opinion. What else? Myth. Values. Fact-value dichotomy. Reason as over against faith. That's why I wrote Longing to Know. Okay? Reason's here, faith is there. Okay? Science as over against, art, religion, emotion. Okay, so that's how I've written out the dichotomies. So Esther's daisy of dichotomies. Don't you see, the column on the left, we associate all those, and this is postmodern talk, we privilege them. And we marginalize or delegitimate the things on the pedals. So belief is on a pedal. Opinions are on a pedal. Interpretation is on a pedal. Values are on a pedal. Faith is on a pedal. Emotions, art. You see how it goes? Now, I'm not saying this is exactly right. This is a diagnostic tool to help you get in touch with the fact that, we have these preconceived notions about knowledge, and they might matter to our knowing. Okay? Objective, subjective, public, private, mind, body, male, female. Does that make you, can you feel that? This is where epistemology gets, about the gut. Who said that? That was great. So we kind of set these up. So in addition to calling this the knowledge as information mindset, I also call this the defective epistemic default. All right? So a default we inherit, we don't know it. It casts everything in a certain way, right? And, DED spells dead. So listen, the problem is not having an epistemic default. It's fine to have an epistemic default. In fact, I think that's humanness. We're creatures, we're rooted, we're situated, we're oriented, we don't have eyes in the back, we have them in the front. We're meant to work from where we are, right? But you want to have a healthy one. Now, the trick is, how do you even see your default? You got to see the default if it's defective before you can fix it. That's why we need epistemological therapy first to see it. And then you can't fix a defective epistemic default of knowledge as information as a mindset by adding information. Do you see that? You need to be changed. It's like your body needs to learn what I'm going to say this week. Where did this come from? Well, it's the Western tradition, but there were a couple of key players at the beginning of modernity. I'm going to go very quickly for the sake of time. Francis Bacon is the knowledge is power guy, right? We're still saying that everywhere. Knowledge is power. Well, what he wanted to say was, you want human knowledge to be manly? Well, power over nature. You want control. Power, control. Of course, we're marked by power. We're in the modern West. René Descartes, father of modern philosophy, and, inventor of the Cartesian coordinates and all kinds of other things, okay? He said, look, it's about being masters and possessors of nature. When he thought he was a Christian, I'm just saying that, but you want to stop thinking about things' purposes. That's totally useless in physics. You just want to think about power and control. No wonder we have problems. Now, Walter Brueggemann, I'm sorry, again, his picture is overlaying here. So there's his picture, there's his book. I'm going to back these off so we can read the quote. Important Old Testament theologian. He's written some wonderful books. In that one book, Truth Telling and whatever that book was, he says, modernity has eroded even our readiness to hold to the miraculous scandal of the resurrection. Here's the deal. Western modernism is really, really hard for Christianity because it's marginalized it too. Okay? And so if you have a knowledge as information mindset, Brueggemann is saying, you can't even preach about the resurrection. Okay? Matters of life and faith cannot be expressed in the tongues of modernity, for its technical epistemology, incapable of doxology, has consigned us to death and despair. Those are fighting words. Now, come back, Mako. So I've been listening a lot to him to try to understand him. And in this book, Culture Care, that came out this year, these are Mako's bad words. These are his curse words, okay, or boo words, as I tell my students. These are the ones that he says boo about. So pragmatism, utilitarianism, commercialism, the transactional, commodification, scarcity, reductivism, fragmentation, those are all things that Mako thinks are bad and characteristic of the modern Western culture. And his comment about these things is, they're killing me. Okay, the soil in which I was planted was not soil I could thrive in. Okay, so there's something toxic about this defective epistemic default. And one time a year ago, I was speaking with him, and he uttered these words: "I am a misfit." And that was after I had done this talk, and I'm saying, no, you're the main act. But he perceives himself as on the pedal, as an artist, right? He knows the pedal is really, really, really important, but artists are liable to say, okay, art is way more important than knowledge. Do you hear the dichotomy, right? Well, and Christians are liable to do that too. Look, I know it's about loving Jesus. So, like one woman said to me, you need to tell those people they got to give up their minds so they can trust Jesus. Okay, now the defective epistemic default, I think, leads to a whole bunch of nasty things. It foments depersonalization, disengagement, et cetera, cluelessness, boredom, hopelessness. We're good at cynicism. And it's disembodied, too. So there's a lot of bad things that come out of this knowledge as information mindset. I think it knocks out of knowing these cool things that are under the X. So wonder, dynamism, adventure, confidence, risk, hope, wisdom, and let's throw Jesus in there, too. He is, after all, the truth. Now, is there a Christian version of the daisy? I would like humbly to suggest there is, and I speak from my own past in a Bible-believing tradition and present. I think we Christians can worship comprehensive Christian information. In fact, we think that's like the thing to live for, to collect all the Christian information, and when we die, we want to die so we get it all straight. Finally, God is going to tell us what it all is, and that's what we live for, is that comprehensive Christian information. So sermons and Bible studies and conferences, and you might have come to seminary for comprehensive Christian information, just saying. We have our own dichotomies. Now, I'm not saying any of these align particularly, so don't read it that way. But I think we think there's absolute truth, and then opposite of that would be relativism. I think we do concede the reason-faith dichotomy sometimes. But then how our Christianity plays out may be whether we side for reason or whether we side for faith. We're big on the theory-application divide, okay? And then here's the one that's most heartbreaking, I think, is when we think of Christian information, well, we're liable to think of theology, seminary classes, sermons, right? But then when we think about our relationship with Jesus Christ, and we know that's the most important thing, don't you see, we tend to think it's not epistemic. So here's the Christian information, and here's my relationship with Jesus out on the pedal. Well, I believe, and I think you believe this too, there isn't anything that the gospel shouldn't be the center of. So what covenant epistemology does is take that relationship with Christ and make it the epistemic paradigm. Okay, so that's where we're going. And that would change everything, especially if you have been a dutiful Christian like I was, inured in the defective epistemic default. Okay, it might be a day of legitimation for you. All right, so modernism, or the modernist epistemology, this is a problem, this linearity. We should get rid of that. Okay, so what does that mean? So if we get rid of linearity, what's that give us? It gives us randomness, So some people have thought, well, you've got modernism, well, you've got to balance it with something that's maybe postmodern, maybe compromise them or put them together in some way or other. Well, here's the trick. If you're working with balancing the postmodern modernist divide, you're stuck with the daisy too. Right? It's another defect, it's another dichotomy. Okay, and if no matter how much you try to compromise them, we preach the Bible at our church, but then we also do this that maybe has more of a postmodern feel or something like that, and we put them together. And churches tend to think this way. You're still kind of exalting that defective epistemic default. So what I propose, I hope, is a third way, a positive third way. It's not a compromise, and it is going to directly heal that epistemic default. So all these cool words are in store for you if you come back at other chapels this week. These are things that I think that we can start to see as we kind of reorient our epistemology. To torpedo that daisy and to redraw the playing field epistemically and put these things at the heart of knowing. That's my last slide. So this is Caravaggio's Supper at Emmaus, and this is a little foretaste of what's to come. What we're looking at there, I feel like that's the paradigm of knowing. Okay, so you've got clueless disciples, right? Clueless. Think about how awful, how horrible it was for them that weekend in Jerusalem. And did I lose my picture? Come back. What happened? We have to look at that picture. Give me my picture back. Anyway, in your head. But here's the thing. There it is. Thank you. So, they are so blind by their preconceived notions that dead men don't rise again, among other things. They're joined by this young, obvious Jewish-looking dude. How does he dress? I don't know. You learned that in seminary. But in any case, they're walking along away from Jerusalem, right? And they start in conversation and say how awful the week was, how awful the weekend was. And this guy says, so what happened? Well, okay, there's a problem with that, right? I mean, here's this Jewish guy leaving Jerusalem after this crisis of a weekend saying, so what things? What happened? And so then they said, well, about Jesus, and we thought he was going to be the Messiah, and then Jesus starts saying, how foolish you are, didn't you read the scriptures? Can you imagine what it would have been like to have him say that? And to tell you that. And later they say, did not our hearts burn within us, right? So their bodies were feeling anticipatively something that their eyes were not able yet to see. So then they get to this moment, and Jesus does something they would have seen him do again and again and again, He took the bread and broke it. We see it in every Eucharist. He took the bread and broke it and gave thanks. And their eyes were opened in the breaking of the bread. And that's this moment. You see this one guy, he's out like that, and the other guy that's like this with his eyes open. And that is this huge, transformative, oh, I see it moment that changes everything. It changes everything. That's the heart of knowing, okay? When somehow you get beyond looking at the information to start to relate to it in a different way, and then reality breaks in and changes everything. Of course dead men rise again if they're Jesus, if they're the Messiah. Of course it's not just about the Romans, it's about me. It's about everybody. Jesus lives, I will too. That's what I profess. That's my Christianity, right? Right? I'm going to live forever. Praise his name, right? That needs to be the paradigm of knowing. So we'll talk about that some more this week. Thank you so much for listening.